Hi everyone, and welcome to the studio. So this is not one of my official monthly videos, so to say. Videos like this will pop up here on my channel every once in a while as little like aids, maybe the occasional tutorial as well, which won't be on the first Sunday of the month like my usual general crocheting videos are, like crocheting topic videos are. Videos like this, as I just said, will pop up every once in a while here on my channel to kind of act as an aid or some sort of a tutorial, just to kind of help through the process, because I know I could have used this when I first got into crochet, and that was within this past 3/4 of a year, 9 months is when I've gotten into crochet. And I know that during this year that I've gotten into crochet, it's been widely accessible on YouTube, but it just wasn't something that came to mind, and I just want to add to all the help videos and aid videos that there are for crochet and beginner crocheters. This is what this is. And this video specifically is to just kind of help determine the right versus the wrong side of a granny square. And as with crocheting, especially when you're doing amigurumi or stuffies, there is very obviously like a right side and a wrong side, or what you can also determine as like the front side or the back side when you're doing something like a blanket or a granny square. And for stuffies and amigurumi, like the woobles, there is like the inside, which would be like the back side of a granny square, and the outside, which would be like the front side of a granny square. So this video is just talking about the right versus the wrong side of the granny squares. And once you start making your own granny squares, it is very easy to tell the right versus the wrong side, the front versus what could be the back. And another reason why I'm doing this specific video is because I am currently making quite a few patterns for blankets specifically that require granny squares. And in the patterns, I give the option of making like a second side, so doing like two blankets, so to say, two sides of a blanket, and then weaving them together. And for something like that, and just even if you're making a one-sided granny square blanket, you want to be able to line up the granny squares and have it all look the same, and have all the sides looking the same, like all the fronts on one side and all the backs on the back side. So that's the reason why I am doing this video. Okay, so I have 4 different granny squares here to show. This one in a solid white color, then a baby sport yarn. Well, all 3 of these are variegated except for this one, but all various colors. So with this first one, you can see that this is the front side. It's a little bit easier to tell the back side with a variegated yarn, but if you can see these lines here, you can see the line here, the line here. Then once you start getting into the square, you see the lines, and this, where you actively see the lines, is the back side, or you see like the lines as more humps, like humped lines, whereas here you do kind of see the lines where it's flat, it's the front, and then where it's more beveled is where it's the back. Beveled humped is where it's the back. And as I said, it is a little bit easier to tell if you have a variegated yarn or a yarn that is another color other than white. So here is the front of this one, and then the back, again, it is a little bit easier to tell with multicolored yarn. Line, line. So again, kind of beveled or humped lines, or more distinct lines where you see the stitches coming together. That is where the back is, and again, where it's all flat and no beveled or humped lines, that is the front. And to show with yarn that doesn't have any white but still has some kind of lighter colors, so this one, it is very easy to tell with this yarn because there is some white in it, but it's mostly colored. So again, kind of that flat, there's the flatness to it, but you can still kind of see the distinctive rounds. Whereas with this side, you see the distinctive rounds, but there's slightly more beveled, slightly more humped lines, distinctive lines between the different rounds. And then for the blue granny square, so again, you see here, because this is more darker to lighter to darker shades of blue, you have the distinctive rounds, but it's all pretty flat. And here, kind of the lines are slightly more beveled or humped. That's where you can tell that it's the back. And especially with the corners too, that's another very easy way of telling. The corners here are very humped, whereas on the front, much more flat on the front. Okay, so again, that is how to tell the front side or the right side of granny squares versus the back or the wrong side of granny squares. This can be applicable to projects like blankets or scarves that are more flat, but at the same time, it's less important for those kinds of projects because you're not necessarily doing rounds, you're just doing rows for those kinds of projects. Whereas with granny squares, with amigurumi and stuffies, as I mentioned, you are more so doing rounds, where with projects like amigurumi or stuffies or with granny squares, it's a little bit more important to be able to tell the right versus the wrong side or the front or the back side. It's more important with projects like this, especially if you're using multiple granny squares for a single project, like a lot of the blankets that I've been working on, the patterns that I've been working on. I really hope this video helped, and if you have any other tips for approaching granny squares or granny square projects, or being able to tell the front or right side of a granny square versus the back or the wrong side, if you have any other tips regarding that, please leave them down below in the comments, and I will see you all in my next video.